the 21st century world and some of its own domestic strains. For example, birth rate going down, massive investment needed in many sectors like energy or health. All of us are equally vulnerable to 21st century security challenges. Nobody can pretend that the nation state is all supreme in the 21st century. And when Russia needs to sort of look for partners to deal with some of those big issues like proliferation or terrorism, we are, whatever the disagreements from one day to the next, the most likely partners. And if Russia feels threatened by having democracies on its borders who want to cooperate with it, then there's obviously something wrong there that we need to try to address through dialogue. So, ladies and gentlemen, where does that leave us? Well, essentially, the partnerships are here to stay. NATO without partners is unthinkable. We, however, rather like the bicycle where you either move forward or you fall off, we can't rest on our laurels. We have to continue to develop this as a resource. Not always easy with so many different partners, each one, of course, wanting to be the center of attention. But we have to find a way of doing it. How are we going to maintain this network? Well, we have to devote the resources to it. We've been doing partnership on the cheap the last couple of years, but if we really want it to thrive, we need to put serious resources, both financial and human, into it. Secondly, we need to sort of develop through these operations more interoperability, so that we learn how to work together, so that we can work together even better in the future. To the extent that NATO also, ladies and gentlemen, takes up topics like energy security, cyber defense, which are of interest to many of our partners. For example, the partners in the Middle East are very interested in energy issues. Then, the partners will want to work with us. If we talk about their topics, they will also want to work with us. We've got to, however, and this will be my final point, give the partnerships also concrete things to do. For example, I think our old friend here, the EAPC, would have a happier time if instead of just being a meeting to exchange information, it would have something to manage. We all know that people are happiest when you give them something to manage, something of their own, which is theirs, which they can nurture, a plant which they can pour water on from time to time. And I think there are certain areas of NATO, like disaster relief, like training, like trust funds, which could in fact be given to the partners or the EAPC to manage. So it's like any relationship at the end of the day. What you get out is what you get in. You remember the Beatles song, Abbey Road? In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Basically, if it was good for the Beatles, why would it not be good for NATO as well? So thank you very much.
I was actually wondering if you could expand a bit on the NATO-Ukraine Commission and to what extent, some issues also become points of tension in the bilateral relationship with Russia. As far as Ukraine is concerned.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for asking me that, because yes, you're quite right. I mentioned this, but rather en passant. And let me be clear, I don't want to give you the impression, because I mentioned it rapidly, that it's not important. It's just difficult to talk about everything, obviously. But NATO-Ukraine Commission, I think that the first thing is it does not meet as frequently as the NATO-Russia Council. But I think one of the reasons has been that in Ukraine over the last couple of years, there's been a good deal of political instability. We have had, as you know, several changes of government. We've had long periods of political paralysis, particularly because of the different political relationship of the president, the Prime Minister. We've had lots of changes in the national security structure. National Security Advisor is a job where people have changed, very, very frequently. And so I think one of the things that's bedeviled our relationship with Ukraine in the area of the partnership and security sector reform has been that the Ukrainians, first of all, have often been too ambitious with what they're trying to achieve. It's no good, coming up with a massive program which is not sustainable given the resources. And secondly, there's not been enough top-level attention to making sure that these reforms are implemented. The easier thing in the world is to have an idea. The most difficult thing in the world is to implement that idea. We all know that. And sometimes the problem, I think, also in the NATO-Ukraine relationship is we've wanted to rush on to the next stage, without actually fulfilling the existing work programme. And that's also what, by the way, I hear when I talk to my EU colleagues, that Ukraine wants to go immediately to a kind of membership plan or, without actually completing the existing work plan. And we much rather prefer, to do it step by step, stage by stage. Of course, this is also, as you know, a chicken and an egg situation. I mean, my son always says, okay, I say to him, Alexander, wash the car. Dad, give me the money first. No, I say, Alexander, you did that to me last week. I gave you the €1 and you didn't wash the car. And so this time, wised up, delivery first and then the reward. But of course, I can also understand that in Ukraine, people often say, well, look, but we need, to convince our population that NATO likes us, that we have the perspective, it's a boost for the reformers. So sometimes it's a difficult judgment. But you saw at Bucharest that NATO has offered now a membership perspective to Ukraine and Georgia. You will be members of NATO one day. So this means that we now, of course, have a process where we have to intensify our engagement with Kiev. The NATO ambassadors are all visiting in the middle of June, and to try to focus them on a plan which will enable them to come into this thing, the membership action plan, pretty soon, and get on with serious security sector reform. And for that, frankly, we need a period of political stability. We've obviously, I think, also going to have to get through the elections of 2009 before the political landscape is completely clarified.
In the aftermath of the Kosovo Air campaign, there was the saying that if anyone thought that the US would ever run a war through the North Atlantic Council again, you must be smoking pot. In current operations, if we're talking about the high-intensity stuff, if NATO is developing more and more into this network and ever-expanding partnership idea, is there then not the risk that the really crucial decisions will not be taken in any proper framework, but just in, well, essentially bilateral diplomacy means, and just the big countries together first, and then everything, the decisions just get rubber stamped on the big formal meetings then afterwards?
Yeah. You asked two questions in one. So let me sort of separate them out. The first thing, as you can imagine, Alexander, I disagree in a major way with the view, which I heard, of course, back in 1999, that NATO was war by committee, and doing this via NATO made for an incompetent, inefficient campaign. Because I think like after any conflict, it's very easy for people to believe in simple explanations to justify why something went wrong. But as you know, who was it said, for every problem in the world, there is a short, easy answer, and it's always the wrong one.